Hello, ladies and gentlemen. EWC is coming up, and I figured we could do a little check-in on where the 8 teams that are competing are at, the expectations of the result, and what the competitive implications are of the tournament. I have to say, first and foremost, I do think that this format is atrocious. The format is going to be a single elimination, best of 3, followed by a finals, best of 5. It's a very, very short tournament in terms of the time span, and I think in terms of the validity of what it means competitively it's almost non-existent. Looking at also in terms of how they've seeded everything is for the purpose of entertainment. You have G2 versus FlyQuest, you have Team Liquid versus Fnatic, Bilibili versus T1, and then Top Esports versus, of course, Gen.G. Considering, if you are Top Esports, or if you're T1, the matchups you have in the first round are way harder. So you're going to have, of course, just cross-regional matchups. It's just, a tournament that is made for the purpose of entertainment. 100%, regardless of what the outcome is, even though I do think that Gen.G is going to win this, I don't think this should count towards the Golden Road. This is like an entertainment tournament, borderline an all-star tournament with a trophy created for maximum pleasure or something. Nevertheless, let's talk about the teams. We have Bilibili versus T1. Bilibili, for those who don't watch LPL, it's kind of hard to judge them. Very, very hard to judge them right now, because a part of me wants to give them leeway for what the format is. So for those who don't know, LPL has moved into a fearless draft format where there is basically 4 groups, all the teams are split into it, and they had a double round robin. There was a match that Bilibili lost, but they had qualified to the winner bracket in the second round. So basically, these groups are played, then the bottom 2 teams of each group go to a loser bracket, where it becomes more difficult to reach the playoff bracket, which is the gauntlet that we know and love. And then there's the winner bracket, where you qualify and you basically seed yourself in, where there's a single round robin of best of 3s. So basically the next round should be a lot more exciting, a lot more dynamic. Bilibili, I think the main thing to highlight about them, I do think that Knight's form is currently quite bad. When we think about Bilibili and their aspirations to win the World Championship and to do more than just to be impactful in the LPL, I think the main thing that Knight wants is a meta where Annie, Lissandra, Nico, Ari, the setup mid laners are the ones that are the most impactful, because I don't get too excited when I think of a Knight Corki or a Knight Tristana. Knight's form is looking quite weak now. I think that with that being said, the positive side, if I look at this team, I do think that Bin is still performing like an absolute beast. The bot lane is looking really, really good, and Shun, has his champions. He has his champions. In a world where there's a lot of bans flying, there is opportunities for bot lanes to still lock in Kalista Renata and pick some of the Senna lanes, due to the fact that a lot of bans are flying in the direction of mid laners and sometimes even top laners because of Skana's existence. So it opens up more room for Bilibili bot lane to create, let's say, more chaotic bot lane scenarios. But this is a team that did indeed lose against LGD. LGD, a team that is mostly carried by Meteor and the mid laner Haishan. They just played better than their counterparts in the matchup. In terms of Bilibili and what form they carry into this tournament, I am not super excited. I think that in the matchup against T1 also a very interesting conversation in regards to where they are at. I do think that with the meta, Tristana, Koki, I don't want to be too harsh with T1, because I feel like they're trying to address their main issue. Currently, for me, watching the T1 games, I do think that Owner is a very, very strong performer. I think he's doing super well. The main issue T1 has wrestled with this entire year, and also the previous year, are moments where the support jungle meta is in a place where these roles really need to work well together. They need to take space together. They need to, contest camps together. They need to put vision down together. Basically, the melee supports. In the past, the first year of this roster, I remember that Korea, his Nautilus was his engaged supports. This is what he played all the time, and he was very, very known for. But somewhere along the line, they kind of whenever they played in finals and they lost series against other teams, it seemed like T1 at some point realized, we need to try something different to reshape ourselves as a team. And now they are taking a couple of steps back, because currently, the meta that Lehen's like, these are supers that are thriving right now. A Delight, whether it's like Rel, Leona, Alistar, Nautilus. These are champions that are being picked because they add that CC and reliability together with the bot lane champs that you play, and with the additional layer that, you know, they synergize very well with the junglers when you're lacking a tank in the jungle position. You can, of course, pick Sejuani, and it gives you a little bit more freedom in the support position to pick other things, but to have options and to strengthen the integrity of a composition, you need to find reliable CC and engage in some positions. And if you want to play the Nidalee, you want to play the Viego or the Brand, or you want to play sometimes even Zyra, finding that in the support position always is a massive strength. So looking at T1 in terms of what they're doing in the regular split, I think that Honor's form is fantastic. I think that Faker in terms of the meta is, I don't think it's that good for him. I think that Zeus has been solid, Gumayusi has been fine, he's trying to play more and more Zeri, they're playing more and more melee supports. I think there is a world where T1 have taken the approach, they're trying to plug their holes as they're moving into playoffs, which I think is the right approach. Because if you think back, their Worlds win came off the back of them losing against Gen.G, where they played Alistair Kaiser against Gen.G and they couldn't keep up in the side lane game, but they needed to protect Faker in order to farm. And this made Zeus die on side, Faker die on side, and Chovy just grew in strength. And of course, Gen.G were just a better performer in that single best of one. That made, of course, T1 rethink their whole game, and they played range supports in the Renata and the Bard, and sometimes even, you know, the Kalista support, the Ashe support. They really revamped the game, and they made everyone follow along with them. But the big change in the game that has happened is that supports need to play a lot more dynamic, because you have the situation where Rift Herald timer, not being level 6 on that timer, minute 8, no longer is relevant. It's like there's so many fights and so many active things you can do in the game with your jungle and your mid lane that you need to be able to work together super well. But this has never been T1's strength. T1 is at their best when Keria and Gumayusi are strong enough to pull a lot of attention and control the flow of their lane phase. And then they extend that into the mid game because they have enough pressure around mid that allows Zeus and Faker to farm freely. And in that process, Owner has a lot of freedom in terms of the choices that he can make. He can set up ganks, he can farm. And as long as the T1 players reach objectives, these are players that are so mechanically talented that they win those situations if they are on even footing and have a very, very strong composition. I bring you back to the conversation of people pointed out T1, they just picked Twisted Fate. Why are they picking Twisted Fate? The main issue with that, Twisted Fate was in a very strong state. Twisted Fate got nerfed maybe 3 times after that. The main issue was that they couldn't find comp integrity because Rel jungle not existing, Maokai bans and Maokai takeaways, Sejuani takeaways, and also not wanting to play melee supports, the comp integrity kind of falls apart. And this is what T1 is trying to solve. So I could see a world where they go into this tournament, maybe they continue practice the same way, or maybe take a step back and try to, of course, perform as well as possible. And based off of that, I'm curious where they will land, because in the first match of Bilibili versus T1, I feel like both mid laners aren't the greatest. Tristana, greatest Corkis. We will just have to see how it pans out, you know? Will Keria continue playing melee supports the same way he's doing in the LCK? Are they doing it because they believe it's the best way to play for them at the time, or do they do it because they want to actually expand and actually work on their biggest flaws? In current form, I have to say that Shun and On just work together better in the current jungle support meta, so I do think that Bilibili should be favored in this best of 3. Team Liquid versus Fnatic. I will start with Fnatic because it's a very interesting conversation. They've had now 3 losses in a row. I think that it is time to hold Razork and Humanoid accountable. The level of their play has been, it's like the floor of their gameplay is so damn low. The team lives and dies by the performance of these 2 players, but when I see Humanoid dying 1v1 against Italia because he gets W'd into the turret, at some point you need to question like what is actually going on here. Like, this doesn't look serious at all. I think that some of the moves that Razork is doing, for example that Vi engage he did against G2 was atrocious. You know, this is something that needs to be harshly addressed, but I think this Fnatic looks like last year's Fnatic. They had a high ceiling because they're individually talented, but their floor was so far down, under the ground almost, and looking at how this tournament, it's like you can frame it two ways. Either it's an opportunity for them to show that they have actively, the issue of managing pressure and managing how well they play together, or it's an opportunity for them to grow, or something that almost seems likely is, will this just be another tournament where they will go to break? They play against Team Liquid in the first round, and Team Liquid is a very, very healthy team. Funny how the contrast between the two teams are. The contrast being, of course, Team Liquid is a team that consistently find new peaks, new peaks, new peaks. I think that Yeon and APA have become the best players in their position, which is crazy for me to even say out loud, considering where they were at last year. I was watching every LCS games and I didn't think much of Yeon. I thought that the reasons he was in the team seemed flawed because they wanted to have, a roster that could play speaking Korean. And then APA, I gave him some leeway because he came into a team where players were mostly speaking Korean, and he came into it middle of the season, played a couple of champs, got into the World Championship, and I think this was a player that deserved more time. But I didn't expect this kind of a glow up. Speaking to Coach JJ on the voice of Yamato, he was telling me that I was seeing this in Yeon all the time in scrims, and I just knew he needed time, and I just needed to push him in the right direction. And Coach JJ, saw that right. And Team Liquid right now, I think that the main thing that they have worked on since MSI is just how they side lane. I think that Impact and, of course, APA said in an interview that he took so much inspiration from how Caps farm side waves, and it's very, very evident. There's many moments where you have 3 players, 4 players tethering to the enemy, baiting them to stick around, baiting them to stay, but then being very aware of the fact that, we are gaining information right now, so our side laners can push all the way through and dominate, They can dominate and farm and push. Often in terms of what you can do to progress the game is just push past the neutrals, leverage your body and your wards to get information of where the enemy team is sending men, and then steal waves, push waves deep. If the enemy makes mistakes, you could even squeeze some tier 2s, but in that process you pursue enemy jungle camps, and then when you get strong enough due to the added income, meaning you being ahead of the curve on 2 core or 3 core, you leverage that international to close out the games. And this is something that Team Liquid does super well. I think the main concern for me with Team Liquid is that I think that Umti, he relies, in my mind right now, like when he plays Sejuani, Maokai, Xin, he's playing these champions that can be active level 3, level 4, level 5. He's kind of like a more consistent version of, let's say, an Isma, right? I think that could be a potential flaw that you chip away at. If he is playing, if he has a limited pool, and maybe you're in a position where Razork can leverage the fact that, he can play some of these carry champions in, for example, Alia or something like this, you can show it off. Maybe there's an angle there. We are playing on 14-13, we are playing on 14-13, so Talia is nerfed. Still a decent champ, but even on that front, Fnatic have shown that they prefer like the Vi's and the Ivan, so maybe even there Razork doesn't really have like a massive edge, because a lot of the champions that they share are, they are just shared. I do think that Team Liquid is favored coming into this matchup against Fnatic. I do think that Team Liquid, Fnatic is the underdog, and maybe that's the best thing that can be the case with Fnatic. I think that a lot of Fnatic fans got a little bit overly excited about seeing Fnatic being 5-0 and then 6-0 leading into the matchup against G2. I think that winning BO1s was not ever anything that would prove to us that Fnatic have solved their issues. This is still a team that has a very high potential peak. I think that Noah has found himself a little bit more comfortable in this meta, I think, than the previous ones, because I think that he was one of the first ones to play Koki AD carry. I think that him being able to play Zeri and some of the crit AD carries, some spots for Aphelios, I think is a good thing for Noah. I think he's better there because I see Noah as a player. He's good at generating gold. I think that Noah and June are very strong laners. I think the main issue was that in terms of closing and having an aura and the presence in the game, when Noah actually has items, that is where I find him to be a little bit lackluster, and that's where I think Ice and Rahel are much better. But I think that some of these crit ADs that Noah is playing, I think that as you get items, they kind of play themselves. And I think that they cover for some of the weaknesses that Noah might have by leveraging the strength that Fnatic have in the early game in Noah and June. Let's see how it transfers against Team Liquid. I expect Lucian to be contested, and Team Liquid still are playing some of the Kalista lanes and so forth. But I think that June and Noah are respectable laners, and we'll see how that pans out. But definitely, I think the Team Liquid are the favorites, slight favorites, I would say. But Fnatic underdog. Followed by Gen.G. Favorites, I don't think that the meta has changed too much. Gen.G are looking very poised to just Grand Slam. Looked like a very, very dangerous team, and I think that all the way up until the best of 5, where T1, revamped the draft and revamped the whole tournament, pushing JDG in the direction of also playing range supports and missing, looking very confused in Korea's world. Gen.G have such a wide spread for everything that they play. I think that they walk into this tournament with the players with the most complete champion pool. And I think that there is a very clear recipe to how Gen.G is drafting right now. There is AP junglers in the form of Zyra, Nidalee, sometimes even Sejuani, Brand can be played. They have and then they just get a 80 mid. I'm not a super big fan of the Lucian. It's funny how like the main issue with Lucian in my mind is that his itemization just isn't exciting enough. I think that when you buy Kraken Slayer, not buying crit, the next crit item becomes weaker and your curve is so much weaker. You basically become a culling bot. I think that Lucian, in terms of his lane against Koki, makes sense because you can dash the Q and you can have a good time. But I think that if Koki goes even, I think this champion is just a lot more impactful. You can go Ninja Tabi, Phage. These are very lane stabilizing items for Koki, and I haven't seen anyone do enough work with Lucian to actually pressure Koki completely out of the game. But nevertheless, back to my initial point, Gen.G melee supports Lehen's Dream, has super great engages, very good mind for the game, plays super well together with his jungle, of course, in Canyon. Canyon is the king of AP jungles, farming junglers. Keen plays the role. He can play the Mordekaiser, he can play the TF, he can play the Cassandra, he can play Skarner. In terms of how this team, how disciplined they are, there is no one in this tournament that is close to how Gen.G plays. I don't see any other team in this tournament as a disciplined team. And the scary part of Gen.G is that they don't need to create any risk because they create leads so naturally, just because of how good they are through lane phase. And Paze has carried on with his momentum. Paze Ezreal against T1 was a thing of beauty. Paze, ever since MSI, has just leveled up and he has stayed there. Gen.G, super favorite to take it all. I think that they will smoke all competition. That's why, once again, the format is quite ass, because Top Esports just has to face them in the first round. Top Esports, though, I do think that Top Esports, once again, the format is very deceptive. They are 6-0 in their group, but they are playing against very ass teams. So it's hard to judge. Top Esports has always been a very good team at smoking teams that are worse than them. I think the main thing that is interesting for me in this case is that the meta is a little bit better for Cream, but probably not enough to say that Cream is going to do super well against Chovy. The last time they faced off against each other, honestly, that best of 5 was the best of 5 that was the closest that Gen.G played all year long, honestly. Maybe not all year long, they did have some 5-game bangers against HLE and T1, so maybe that's too far. I maybe retract that because it's not something that I have thought about too much. The Top Esports best of 5 was close. It was back over like Kareem on his Tristana performance. Their bot lane is a very good bot lane, right? I do think that Top Esports have the capacity to actually, challenge Genji. But I do think Genji is favored coming into it. I think the key detail here, right, is that I do think that Tian has been performing super good. I think that Tian, you know, for a lot of viewers that might not be watching LPL, people look at Tian as like a meme because of his, you know, stints during some of the World Championships in the past, post his World Championship victory. So for some, people are looking at Tian as a meme, but I think these are just people that don't watch LPL. LPL happens to be the major region that the West watches the least. Tian is a very, very strong player, and I think in that best of 5 against Canyon, he actually put up a very, very good performance. I think that this could be a very interesting best of 3, but Genji, of course, is favorite, but I don't think Top Esports is a team that you can underestimate. I almost feel like Top Esports might have a greater chance to upset Genji than anyone else has in the tournament. Because I think a very crucial detail for Top Esports coming into this is that last MSI, they were probably the worst lane swap team at the tournament. I've never seen a top lane like 369 be so utterly ass when it comes to lane swapping. And that is practically removed from the game. We still see it occasionally. Genji is a team that did it too, when there's extreme cases of lane disparities. But I do think that 369 can show a greater performance than what he did at MSI. So I do think that Top Esports is a formidable opponent, and I think that, you know, if it was for a different seeding system, I think they could have maybe made a deeper run here. G2 versus Fly. At G2, I think that definitely they started off with some MSI lag. They didn't have the greatest start in the LEC, but the LEC level right now is in a place where I don't think G2 ever need to sweat. It's like you trust the processes and the players that are in G2 to bounce back. I think that Cap started slow, but then he caught up. I think this is a team that is going to do much better than FlyQuest. They're going to win the first series, but then the next best of 3, I think, is just going to be a complete loss. I think right now, this team in G2 is just the usual discussion. It's like Caps is doing well. I think that Mickey and Yike play around Caps well. There is, you know, some meta ideas that are interesting, like the Dr. Mundo. You know, G2 is a very, very similar team to what we saw at MSI. I don't expect them to revamp, and I do think that they are going to smoke FlyQuest. FlyQuest, I think in the short term, probably will look a little bit worse with Quad. There's nothing that stands out to me in terms of Quads. I feel like FlyQuest and their identity is very similar. I think a big issue for them will be Busio figuring out how to play melee supports, because this is a player that I think enjoys playing the range supports. I think that, for example, when they played the Kalista Renata lane, I think that they looked quite good. I think the key thing for FlyQuest, right, is that it was very obvious watching them that they were choking giga hard. Coming into their matchup against PSG, it didn't look like they even believed that they could win. And they basically covered the whole spectrum of choking, in my mind, in that series. You had players that tried to overdo every single play in Inspired and Whipple. And then you had a mid laner that just became completely passive and began to follow blindly decisions that were being made. And then the bot lane that just played in a way that was so afraid of losing. But that is now, you know, they have added Quad, who's going to now play at his first international tournament. You have a bot lane now that has a little bit more experience, but I think that they're going to get completely annihilated by G2. I think FlyQuest is a team that has like decent individual players, but in terms of macro play, some of the things that we described about Team Liquid, FlyQuest is very, very far behind on that conversation. Very, very far behind in terms of how they progress games and accelerate games, and how they blow up leads and play with some sense of discipline. FlyQuest is not there. That's pretty much it. Some of my thoughts on the 8 teams that were at MSI.